Welcome to Neighborhood Services and Education Committee. I think we have a quorum, so I'll ask someone from our city clerk's office. I'm not sure who's here from the office to call roll.
Jimenez, Cohen, Esparza,
Here.
Carrasco,
Present.
Arenas.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Wonderful. Thank you. The first item on our agenda is the review of work plan. And we have two items that are on to be deferred. That's Public Life Annual Report from Parks and Rec. And then the Education and Digital Literacy Strategy Annual Report, which I have previously talked to Jill and Angel about to have a verbal report in lieu of that deferment. Could I get a motion for that?
Yeah, council members, that was an info memo on the instead of a verbal.
Excuse me. Yes, I don't know why my brain wants to continue to call it a verbal report. An info memo, yes.
So does the motion need to be to defer both?
Yes, it's a request
for
both, for deferral for item B1 and B2, and for B2 to have an info memo come in.
Okay, move to defer, and for B2 to have an info memo.
Second.
Perfect. If we can get a
Jimenez, Cohen, Esparza,
Yes.
Carrasco,
Aye.
Arenas.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. All right, so moving right along, there's nothing under our consent calendar. And let me ask Karen really quick. There were two folks who wanted to speak. I don't know, for deferrals, is that a public comment item?
We don't typically, but you can. It's at your discretion, Chair, if you would like them.
Okay, since
give
we're
them the
ready.
opportunity.
Thank you, Karen. Since we already took the vote, I think we'll just move forward to our.
That's fine.
Thank you, Karen. To reports to committee, starting off with the Office of Immigrant Affairs Activities and Welcoming San Jose Plan 2021 to 2024 report.
Great. Guess that's my item. Good afternoon, council members and members of the public. I'm Sulma Mastiel, Director of the Office of Racial Equity, and excited to finally present to you the report of the Immigrant Affairs work and the new Welcoming San Jose plan. We were scheduled to bring forward this plan to you in March of 2020, but as a result of COVID, the council committee meetings were canceled for a few months, but we're back and we're ready to share with you highlights of what the Immigrant Affairs team has been doing, as well as to recommend that the Neighborhood Services and Education Council Committee to accept the report and the Welcoming San Jose plan and cross-reference this with the April 20th, 21 City Council meeting for approval. Next. Thank you, Gina. So today I'm going to provide a look back at and highlight some of the accomplishments of the Immigrant Affairs team, as well as describe the challenges and the opportunities that those challenges produced. I'll briefly describe the approach that we took to develop the Welcoming San Jose Plan version 2.0, and we'll provide a high-level review of the goals and strategies in the plan. Next. So just as some context setting and a little bit of a reminder, the Office of Immigrant Affairs was established in 2015. And essentially the office was established to help build a welcoming community, a community where immigrant and refugees felt like they belonged. San Jose is home to nearly 40% of the city's residents that were born in another country. And we know that many more San Jose residents have immigrant relatives and family members, with approximately 60% of children having at least one immigrant parent. We also know that over 52% of San Jose's households speak a language other than English. We also know that more than half of the immigrants in San Jose metro area, which is, other cities around the San Jose, more than half are naturalized citizens, but we also have about 21% that are undocumented residents. So as such, the vision statement and the mission statement you see on this slide represent our aspirations to create a place where immigrants and refugees are engaged, respected, and have opportunities to reach their fullest potential. And how we do this, we want to facilitate and accelerate the immigrant inclusion in civic, economic, linguistic, and social aspects of life in San Jose. But it's important, and I'd like to take this moment to acknowledge that while we're working hard to create a city where immigrants feel a sense of belonging, we must not forget that Black, Indigenous, Chicanos also desire to feel welcomed, and that immigrant justice and racial justice work are intertwined. I also want to clarify that the role of the Immigrant Affairs team is to not be a direct service provider. We have an excellent group of immigrant serving organizations who deliver needed services. And so what we found and what's been reinforced over the last few years at the Office of Immigrant Affairs has been working with community partners is that our role is best when we're as conveners, as to educate the city workforce about the diverse communities in San Jose, to advocate, coordinate amongst city departments, collaborate across multiple jurisdictions, leverage resources, and be the bridge between immigrant community and the city organization. Next. So in the council memo, there is some detail about the work that's been done by the Immigrant Affairs team. And here are just some highlights, but in the section of the memo, not only are there details about the progress made, we identified the important collaborations with community partners as well as deliverables. And so some of the examples that are highlighted here on this slide is that the city of San Jose, in coordination with the county of Santa Clara and various community partners, we basically supported the naturalization efforts to co-sponsor citizenship workshops. So what we do know is that there are 83,000 people, over 83,000 people in Santa Clara County who are eligible to become US citizens, but for various reasons have not. And so our efforts to continue to co-sponsor and promote citizenship through our libraries and community centers, through the citizenship corners, and co-sponsor citizenship workshops is still very important. And in between the years of 2018 and 2019, we served almost 2,100 immigrant participants, and those that participated in those citizenship workshops, of those 2,100, 950 naturalization applications were completed. We also operationalized the city's first ever language access policy. We ensured that we also had citywide vendor contracts available to all city departments. We provided a language access training to operationalize that language access policy. And that training was provided to over 1,000 city staff members in the course of 3 years. We also launched 2 in-language civic leadership academies in Spanish and Vietnamese with 40 participants, in which 94% of them reported that they were more knowledgeable about city departments, and 97% reported that they were more comfortable attending city meetings. We partnered with the New American Economy to build awareness of the economic contributions of immigrants. We released 2 San Jose specific research reports, and most recently, one that was focused intentionally on immigrant data related to the COVID-19 pandemic. We hosted a variety of cultural events and community experiences with partner organizations. That's part of the bridge building we'd like to do. We coordinated with the city legislative team to advocate for state and federal legislation to support the immigrant community through 15 support letters, as well as litigation opposing the rescission of DACA, adding a citizenship question to the census, and public comments on public charge rule and the Flores settlement agreement. We collaborated with many community partners to develop an immigrant navigation system, for which basically a pathway tool for adult schools and community colleges. We co-hosted a skilled refugee and immigrant convening with the Refugee and Immigrant Forum and participated in 4 skilled refugee and immigrant job fairs together with 81 employers and 468 skilled refugees and immigrants. And aside from the work that we were doing for the past Welcoming San Jose plan, in addition, the Immigrant Affairs team had to pivot in response to community priorities and that were outside of the Welcoming San Jose plan, such as the census work. We started out about 4 years ago with what's called LUCA, the local update to the census address list. And we and community partner organizations canvassed hard to count neighborhoods to identify well over, I think, 26,000 housing units that were not originally in the census address list. And that happened literally by being on the ground, identifying types of units that should be included in the census address list. So our work on census really started about 4 years ago. We also supported the work of the Community-Driven Rapid Response Network, a 24-hour hotline for undocumented immigrants and their families to get immediate support if targeted by immigration and customs enforcement. And the Rapid Response Network has built trust in the undocumented community, as evidenced by receiving over 7,300 calls in the span of 3.5 years. We supported public charge awareness and trainings and coordinated the initial training of the 56 city employees through the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. Next. So I feel like this is probably going to take just a little more time because there were so many challenges, but the primary challenges were really the federal administration, the last federal administration, and the cruel policies that really were combative against the immigrant and refugee populations across the US. And then, of course, we all know that the COVID-19 pandemic is still a problem. And those two challenges also created some opportunities for us. So as a result of the federal administration and its very cruel policies in terms of what happened in 2017, that essentially is what was, collaboratively with the county and partner organizations formed the Rapid Response Network, which is not only trusted by the community, but serves as a safety net for the undocumented community. The Immigrant Affairs team, as I said, we had to really step up our game on the census piece. We formed the Immigrant Subcommittee. It's a subcommittee of the county census collaborative. We wanted to ensure that the city, county, and community partners were reaching hard to count communities in a culturally and linguistically responsive manner. Those other challenges, the federal administration and COVID pandemic, also illuminated the work of how important it is to center equity in everything that we do. And so racial equity work has become central in discussions from the community level to legislative level. And due to the advocacy and insistence by members of this council committee and the community, the mayor and the city council unanimously agreed to establish an Office of Racial Equity last year. And lastly, the other significant opportunity that resulted from the two challenges above was the deployment of the Immigrant Affairs team into the EOC, into the Emergency Operations Center last spring. So while this is not in the memo, it's important that I highlight how our work was redirected and redeployed and how our efforts redeployed last year for the Immigrant Affairs team. So again, opportunities, right? So we took the opportunity since we were in the room to launch the first ever language access unit in the Emergency Operations Center. And I think it's the first ever in any emergency operations center where there's a language access unit that is as robust as ours in San Jose. And we're very proud of that. We coordinated with 32 bilingual staff from 10 departments. And as a result, over 2,600 communication pieces were translated in the primary languages other than English spoken in San Jose. We set up fast turnaround contracts with professional translation vendors, and those are now can be used by all departments. We also created a glossary of over 800 commonly used San Jose terms in Spanish, Vietnamese, and traditional and simplified Chinese for use by the Emergency Operations Center. So essentially, when translations occur, we want to make sure that they're culturally responsive and that they're really understood by the local community. And so this glossary of terms helps with, future emergency responses and being able to identify words that really make sense to our local community. We also coordinated the filming of 141 in-language videos on various topics, from COVID to census to the fires, so a variety of things. And all of that was in coordination with not only our bilingual staff, but for the videos, we made sure we reached out to our immigrant and refugee serving organizations, tapped their leaders to be the messengers of important COVID-related information. Next. And then one more slide on the efforts. So again, redirected. The next slide, please. There we go. This is basically delineates other ways that the Immigrant Affairs team had to redirect its efforts to support the COVID response. A part of that, an important piece of that was we convened and coordinated engagement with 70 immigrant serving community-based organizations to inform and support a financial assistance program, coordinated outreach and responses directly to 265 impacted residents. So we did a community survey within 4 days to make sure that it informed the way that we provided financial and rental assistance. We have served in the Local Assistance Task Force, Nonprofit Local Assistance, CBO Outreach Unit, the Virtual Community Engagement Branch, the Food and Necessities Branch, where I served as liaison with all the cities in the county to ensure the distribution of over 22 million meals a week, served in the community, and I currently serve in the Community and Economic Recovery Branch. But in addition to those recovery or those COVID response efforts, the small and mighty team of the Immigrant Affairs led work in last spring on conducting a sprint budget equity review process for about a dozen proposals. We developed and implemented the 2021 Budgeting for Equity tool process. We started in November and it's ongoing now. We assisted in the development of the San Jose Equity Atlas, which essentially is a demographic explorer. It has layers of demographic data that we're still working on. It's still in construction, and I can't wait till it's something that we'll be able to launch and release. We developed a racial equity framework for the emergency response, basically the Emergency Operations Center, and other things. So while we were supporting the COVID response, it was still really important for us to keep in mind the work of the Immigrant Affairs, particularly the Welcoming San Jose strategies from the previous work plan. Gina, next. And we don't want to lose sight of that because, there are things that we still needed to do, like take positions on legislation. We needed to submit public comments related to federal policy changes that impacted immigrants. We wanted to continue to promote citizenship, continue the work of the Rapid Response Network, and then and certainly reconnect with our community partners to make sure that the Welcoming San Jose Plan 2.0 that we had developed in the fall of 2019 was still relevant. And so we worked again last fall to refreshen that. So back to the item at hand related to the Welcoming San Jose Plan 2.0. We conducted a two-pronged approach to inform and develop the Welcoming San Jose Plan. The first was that there was an audit conducted by the Welcoming America organization, which is a national organization that provides technical assistance to local governments aiming to create a better environment for immigrants. And number two, community engagement, which is really a practice in everything that we do. Next. So just highlights, the audit that was conducted in April of 2019 essentially was rolled out by a team of Welcoming America staff members, where they reviewed all of our documents in the Office of Immigrant Affairs, interviewed 36 partner organizations. They included community partners and city staff as well. And they measured the Office of Immigrant Affairs work against the Welcoming America national criteria. So without going into all of those details, in response to that lengthy audit report, the Immigrant Affairs team will carry out the following action items, basically lessons learned in areas where the auditing team thought that we could improve. And so those items that are listed there are just highlights of some of the things that we could do better. And that is develop an evaluation and data collection plan, improve feedback and accountability through an advisory group, focus on job training, explore greater collaboration with the philanthropic and private sectors. Next. So I'll go quickly through the rest of the piece, but the city used a collaborative approach to develop a plan that would serve the San Jose's diverse immigrant population by identifying community partners that would serve on a working group for a 6-month planning process. And these are the various phases. There are 11 primary working group members. We also had a number of, through a survey, 134 unique voices from 47 community groups engaged. We are deeply grateful for their time, effort, and contributions and commitment to crafting the plan that I'm about to present to you. So like I said before, we started in August of 2019. We finished it. We were supposed to present this to you last spring of 2020. It was deferred. So we had to refresh the Welcoming San Jose plan. And so we re-engaged our partners to ask questions like, are these still relevant in light of the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic? So there were revisions that were made, and that's what's reflected in the attachment to the council memo. Next. So just quickly, if you've seen the previous work plan, these are very similar pillars: leadership and communications, access and engagement, education and economic opportunity, and safe communities. And these are also in alignment with the national strategies. Next. So I'll just go, I'm not going to read the entire slide, but essentially the items in the orange column is essentially the goal, and everything in the white column are some of the strategies that are taken out of the plan. So under leadership and communications is to establish equitable systems, policies, and practices throughout the city that create a welcoming and inclusive environment. Next. For access and engagement, improve immigrant access to city information and services, and augment immigrant participation in civic life. Next. Education and economic opportunity. We intend to advance educational and economic opportunities among immigrants and refugees through job skills training, strengthening career pathways, promotion of entrepreneurship, small business retention, growth, and financial literacy. Next. Foster trust in the safe communities pillars, foster trust and communications between law enforcement, local government, immigrants, and the community at large. Next. So an important piece, I think, to just to wrap this up is that while we've been focusing on advancing the work of the Welcoming San Jose plan and responding to a pandemic and responding to various other things, and now we have an Office of Racial Equity. It's important to note that we will be integrating the new Welcoming San Jose plan and the team into the Office of Racial Equity. And we recognize that we cannot do welcoming work within the immigrant community without addressing systemic racism. And though we did not call it racial equity work in 2015 when we established the Office of Immigrant Affairs, that is what we are doing, and embedding the work of the Office of Immigrant Affairs into the newly created Office of Racial Equity simply makes sense. So the next steps is that we will continue to work with a consulting firm that we have hired, Actionable Insights, to develop an evaluation plan. And the evaluation plan will include performance measures of the strategies that are included in there in all 4 pillars. The evaluation plan will include both population community indicators, which keeps our eyes on the big picture, such as employment, citizenship, and other rates, and program level indicators, which measure the impact on the individual served through the internal work, through the city staff, as well as those served through our partners, such as ESL classes, citizenship workshops, and job training programs. So several of our community members have already started working with our consultant, and we plan on meeting in May to discuss the feasibility of collecting the desired data, to get buy-in, and to discuss data collection procedures. Following that, we'll have an evaluation plan in writing, and all of this will allow us to kick off the 21-22 Welcoming San Jose plan on solid ground by being able to measure our collective progress towards the Welcoming San Jose goals. So that concludes my presentation, and I am happy to take questions.
Thank you. I didn't realize, well, you know what? I have a question for Karen. So one of the members of the committee is asking to defer discussion on this item. And so I wanted to know, in terms of process, how do we deal with this? Or what is the path to move forward?
Sure,
Okay.
it's a little difficult. We probably should have taken action under orders of the day to defer this item in its entirety before we started the discussion.
Mhm.
Since we're at this point, typically what would be done is that you would take public comment, and then the members of the committee could decide to have this discussion carried over to the next committee meeting in May. So that's about as far as we could go in terms of somewhat deferring the discussion by the committee members. Again, it would be to take public comment, and then the committee members on their motion could then defer further discussion and an ultimate decision until the next committee meeting.
Great. So I will have public comment happen next, and then if one of the members of the committee can please make that motion as Karen just reflected. Thank you.
Wait,
Thank you.
sorry, Chair, before you move on to public comment, could you repeat what that motion would be?
Sure. Oh, Karen, sorry, go ahead.
Sure. So at this point, it would be to allow public comment, and then for the committee members on their motion to then defer further discussion by the committee members and an ultimate decision on what you would like to do to the next committee meeting in May.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have Mr. Paul Soto.
Thank you, Councilwoman Arenas. First of all, I would like to extend my gratitude on behalf of my ancestors that I have laid out right here in front of me, the birth records of my ancestors to 1821 here in California. And it is on their behalf that I extend my gratitude to you, Sulma, and to the Office of Immigrant Affairs and Racial Equity for the enormous task that you have been given to articulate the experience of my people. Now, there is no such thing as a Mexican immigrant in the state of California. This needs to be the focal point. This needs to be the basis by which we move. There is no such thing as a Mexican immigrant in the state of California. We have been indigenous to this area for thousands of years. It is in the psyche of the American perspective. And ever since July 14th, 1846, when Thomas Fallon planted his flag here in San Jose and declared via Peter Burnett, and I quote, "The war of extermination of the Indians is to be expected. Though it is with great regret, it is against the will and wisdom of man to prevent," end quote. This is the inaugural address that he gave establishing the state of California. I have, since that time, continually suffered under those policies. And it's coming to a point where it's becoming vulgar and disgusting for this entire country and this city to continue to deny me my birthright and everything that is associated with it. I'd like to thank you for acknowledging the Chicano as a distinct group that has suffered in a way that the first and second immigrant population has never. They have no clue. They have no idea how it is to feel disconnected because of language. I can't speak Spanish because they beat it out of my mother. That's what they did to me. That is what this fucking country did to me.
Thank you, Mr. Soto. Mr. Beekman.
Hi, thank you. I've learned a lot from Paul the past few days. Thank you for his work. For my own self in this issue, it's important for myself to be considering, there's some real hangups with the Zoom issues around language interpretation. And, to me, it feels like, what was described in this item today, to make city council meetings available to new immigrants and to just everyday people of the community, a large majority come from other places at this point. To offer different languages for the community public meetings, I think is an incredible need and experience and integration process that I think is really important. I'm getting a lot of help from tuning into meetings each day and each week, and it helps me a lot to a certain degree. And I count on it, and I need its services basically. I think you should be able to provide better language interpretation with Zoom and learn to practice that with Zoom. There is a real, since the 80s, mid 80s, there's been a real stifling, that things have to be in English only. And we have to learn how to get out of that framework. And it's hard work to do that. And we're trying, and we have to just simply be open to that concept right now and really learn to work out of it. You can easily find kids at San Jose State who would be glad to interpret, I feel, and to call on San Jose City Government Union to work for $100 an hour instead of $300.
Thank you, Mr. Beekman. Brian is next.
Hello, thank you. I really wanted to acknowledge that gentleman that spoke, both Mr. Beekman and the other gentleman, I didn't catch his name, I'm sorry. But he's absolutely right about disenfranchised people. The problems we're having at the border are caused by what in some respects, what our nation did during the 60s, 70s, 80s, when we interfered with dozens of elections down in Central and South America. We basically took half a country away from the people who lived here before, the Native Americans or indigenous peoples. I'm trying to learn the new, more inclusive language, which is really important. But the tragedy is that there's a lot of people that are disenfranchised by their culture being denied. And it's gotten worse. It got worse under that other guy that was running the White House, or not running, it was like a game show, reality game show for him. And it is for some people, but it's not. You heard the gentleman there. People, Native, indigenous peoples, my mom was a sharecropper but Irish, but if you didn't speak perfect English, you got yourself slapped in the head. I know when I was a kid, if I didn't speak good or read right, I was slapped across the side of the head too. Or, pushed in the ground or kicked or whatever the teacher felt like doing to you. And it does make you not want to speak your language or try to learn. Personally, I'm dyslexic, and it's been a major bane in my life. But I'll tell you what, I don't want to make any mistakes. That stuff, even though it's 50 years ago, still sticks with you. If fear of doing anything wrong. And all that totally impacts people's lives. And I don't know how you change that. It's done through policy, but it's done through realizing that there's thousands of years of things that have just. So I want to acknowledge that gentleman, what he had to say, and with Mr. Beekman too. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And a great point, yes, in acknowledging our speakers and their experiences and how immigrants contribute to our the fabric of what we see now today. So thank you for doing that. And I think at this point, Karen, we'll hear a motion, correct?
Yeah, can I jump in? I just realized, Committee Chair Arenas, that this is cross-referenced to the April 20th City Council meeting. So I don't know if the will of the committee is to have this be brought back in May and then cross-reference it out of the May committee to a June council meeting, or if the will of the committee is to accept the report, give direction to staff to bring forth additional information to the April 20th discussion in front of the full council. But I just wanted to highlight that there is a cross-reference to April 20th City Council meeting, so we'll need to address that as well.
Great, and I will hear from my committee colleagues to see what the will of the committee is.
I think Councilmember Carrasco.
Oh yes, I'm sorry, Councilmember Carrasco, I apologize.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm having to view the presentation through my iPhone, which makes it a little bit more complicated than having all of the buttons and all the reactions on one screen. I have to constantly go back and forth. So You just let me know when it's my turn to speak and I'll unmute. Is it, and I don't know if you're calling on me, Chair?
I sure am. It's your turn. You're
Okay,
it.
thank you. Thank you.
We'll guide you. No worries.
I wish I had a really big screen. So, so I'm not, let me just say that I'm going to make a motion I don't know exactly how I'm going to craft this motion, but I will tell you that what I'm looking for is additional information so that we can have a robust conversation. The report is it's informative to a certain extent, but I'm digging for more information. Back in Suma, you can correct me, I think it was 2015 that the Office of on Immigrant Affairs was established. 2015. I believe it was a memo that Councilmember Perales and myself drafted in March or early spring of 2015 that helped to establish this office. And so I had some ideas in mind in terms of why I went ahead and actually fought for this. There was some opposition on the council at that time. We weren't sure if we were going to be able to establish it or not. And then it's become, it was an issue for a couple of years after that in terms of truly establishing it as an office. And so for me, needing to have information on the work that's been done through the office, I know that there's a whole array of things that were listed here on the memo, but I'm looking for additional clarification. So I don't know if the best thing to do is to bring it back to the committee and then cross-reference it to a later time, or if we want to have this done at the council. And so I guess I'm looking for, before I make that motion, I am looking for some opinion from my council colleagues.
Councilmember Carrasco, I would suggest that we continue with the conversation here at committee before we move forward to council, as all committees are meant to help shape the policy. And I think that's what you're looking for in terms of having more additional information so that we can craft policy. So that is my opinion, is that we delay, if we delay the deferral, that we also delay the cross-reference to council. And Councilmember Esparza.
I just wanted to say that I agree. My preference would be the former, to have this come back to the committee before it gets referred to council. Thank you.
Okay, then I'm going to make a motion to defer this for further discussion and then cross-reference it afterwards.
Second.
Great, thank you. Ruth?
Cohen,
Aye.
Esparza,
Yes.
Carrasco,
Aye.
Arenas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. We are going to move forward with the next item, and that is item 2. It's food insecurity among youth, families, and senior report. And this is a EOC food branch verbal report.
Hi.
It's all yours, Jill.
Hi,
It's all
Jill.
mine. Okay, I'm going to present my screen then. Alrighty. Can you all see the screen? Yes. Okay. I'm going to assume yes, and I'm going to assume that everyone can hear me. Good afternoon.
Yes, on both, Jill. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chair. The committee, members of the committee and members of the public, my name is Jill Mariani. I'm the Deputy Director for the Food and Necessities Branch of the Emergency Operations Center. And I'm joined today by Angel Rios, our Deputy City Manager. And today I'm going to be providing an update on food insecurity among our youth, family, and seniors. This presentation will provide an overview of what food insecurity is, followed by a deep dive into our vulnerable populations. And then we're going to explore the impact that COVID-19 has had on food insecurity, as well as a year-to-date review of some of the City of San Jose's efforts to address food insecurity alongside our food ecosystem partners. Then we'll go over the milestones the city has accomplished, and then we'll take a look at some of our next steps as we transition to recovery. So it's a lot to cover, so we're going to get started here. So food insecurity as a term is really loaded with a lot of misunderstandings and assumptions. And it's important to understand exactly what it is in order to address these so that we can truly identify and help our populations in need. So according to the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, food insecurity is defined as the disruption of food intake or eating patterns because of a lack of money or other resources. So what that really means is that you can experience food insecurity and be overweight. You can experience food insecurity and you can have a school lunch every day. You can experience food insecurity and have food at your home, but have a medical reason why you can't prepare it for yourself. Food insecurity can be temporary or it can be long-term. It may be influenced by a number of factors, including income, employment, race, ethnicity, and or disability. And food insecurity is not a black and white issue. It's extremely complex and comprised of many shades of gray. As many of you already know, food insecurity is not a new challenge for us here in the Bay Area. We've been fighting it for years. In fact, 5 years ago, the San Francisco Chronicle ran a story on food insecurity and the challenges that we face. At that time, they found that 11.5% of the population is food insecure. And one of the things that I really appreciated about this work is that they indicated approximately how many folks of each region qualified for aid programs like CalFresh, SNAP, and WIC, and how many did not. So at that time, 5 years ago, 1 in 10 members of our community here in Santa Clara County was found to be food insecure. And of those 1 in 10, over 35% of them do not qualify for any aid programs. This is important back pocket information to keep in mind as we look towards recovery. And who are we talking about when we consider these 1 in 10? We are mostly talking about seniors, children, and communities of color. Those aren't the only categories, but they are definitely the most prevalent. So we'll start off with looking into our seniors and their ongoing struggle with food insecurity. In 2018, of all the food insecure households, over 2.9 million of these included an adult over the age of 65. This is important because seniors many times have health conditions in which eating a healthy diet is imperative for them to be able to live their lives and manage their health conditions. Even more troubling is that seniors with multiple chronic conditions are 3 times more likely to be food insecure. In this country, 1 in 6 children live in a household that is food insecure. Similar to seniors, food insecurity for children is especially detrimental to the well-being of a child's health, given the negative impacts to the growth and development that have lifetime consequences. According to Feeding America, 84% of low-income households report that when they do buy food, they buy the cheapest, not the most healthy, in order to stretch their dollars to provide enough to eat. This means that food insecure children oftentimes suffer from childhood obesity, as their food choices are limited to highly processed, high-fat, and high-sodium foods. Food insecurity is also known to be a cause of behavioral problems, which means that children with food insecurity are more likely to have difficulty concentrating in school, resulting in negative academic performance, which have lifelong socioeconomic impacts. Food insecurity also disproportionately impacts communities of color. According to the USDA Economic Research Service, food insecurity impacts Latinx and African American families at double the rate compared to other populations. Feeding America recently reported that racial prejudice, language, education, and cultural barriers continue to create inequalities for these groups, making them more vulnerable to food insecurity. Additionally, discriminatory policies and practices have led these populations to be more likely to live in poverty and more likely to face unemployment. Given the fewer financial resources like savings or property than their white counterparts, all of these factors increase the likelihood for communities of color to experience food insecurity. And probably the most shocking aspect of all of this is that everything I have shown you so far, all of that data, the diagrams, the information, was all a reflection of our food insecurity crisis before the pandemic ever hit. After the shelter-in-place orders were enacted, the number of people who rely on Second Harvest Food Bank doubled overnight. They are now serving 500,000 unduplicated individuals each month. 500,000. That's 25% of the population in Santa Clara County, or 1 in 4 people. That level has sustained even as we have seen a loosening in restrictions and begin our recovery process. So we have seen a dramatic rise in food insecurity, and then it plateaued, and it's been at that level pretty much ever since. When I talk to our food network partners, they all tell me the same thing. The damage here has been done, and it will take years to recover from this if we ever truly recover at all. This could be our new baseline in food insecurity. So if we rewind back to 1 year ago, food and necessities distribution was not a service that we provided or were responsible for other than supporting the senior nutrition program and a few after-school programs from time to time. But when the County of Santa Clara asked us to step up and take on food and necessities while they focused their efforts on the COVID-19 public health response, the City of San Jose took on that challenge and created the Food and Necessities Branch in the Emergency Operations Center. And all of our work aimed to center around these 3 core objectives: to feed our most vulnerable, to maximize our existing food network, and to scale for a widespread food crisis. After we identified our key objectives, we built a team. And at first, it was a very large team because we had to make sure that we had these points of contact established. We needed to have a chain of command. And we needed information to be able to flow so that we could make decisions quickly. We needed councils and committees that had external partners on them so that we could make sure that we're headed in the right direction and we were leveraging their expertise, because they're the ones that have been doing this work since day one, before the COVID pandemic, and they'll be doing it after the COVID pandemic. We really wanted to make sure that we amplified our impact so that we could really, truly have a beneficial effect on our community. Just as we started putting together our objectives and goals, food insecurity exploded overnight. The needs of our community grew by over 2 million meals per week in just 5 weeks. Luckily, we were able to support the scale of this increased need because of our amazing network of food partners. And here are some of them. These are the true community heroes that have created a food safety net for our most vulnerable populations. They were really quick to pivot. They increased their production. They increased the number of deliveries. They've done everything asked in order to avoid a widespread food crisis in Santa Clara County. And they really are our amazing group of people that I've had the privilege to work alongside. And then together with our food network partners and all of the work they were doing, we were able to create this countywide food map tool. And it was really cool because if you had a need, you could just go into it, put in your address and find what was around you. You could get the information about when different food distributions were happening and what times they were happening at. And we would keep that updated in real time. And so our food network partners would provide that information and we would keep it updated. And it worked out pretty good, I think. Then we started collecting other real-time data. So what we found was that our partners on the ground, they had additional needs. You know, sometimes they were running out of gloves or PPE, or they needed more masks. And so we created this way that they could provide these somewhat real-time weekly reports to put in those asks, and then we could be a good partner to them and support them in ways that were beyond just simple food distribution. And 1 year later, we have served over 60 million meals, and we're still counting. So we're still doing the good work. According to our food distribution dashboard, we have seen a slight decrease in food insecurity, but just as our partners tell us, you know, we'll continue to see these elevated levels of need for quite some time. The data also, just as a note, recently has gotten a little less reliable over time. And that's because a lot of our on-the-ground food partners are actually not just only doing food, they're supporting other things as well, like vaccinations and you know, other types of economic recovery efforts. So they're kind of a little thin, but they keep on doing as much as they can. And in many ways, this slide is very bittersweet to me because there have been honestly so many successes that have come through my email personally. So many thankful residents reaching out to just express their sincere gratitude that we were able to help when they needed it most. We had school distributions to support low-income children and families. We launched Great Plates Delivered, which supports seniors and also aims to help out our restaurant community. We also we distributed diapers and formula for some of our newest residents in our community. And so that it was a very broad range of service under food and necessities, but it was extremely rewarding and definitely impactful for community and our community. And we know that the work here though is not over. And it couldn't have been done without our almost 6,000 volunteers that stepped up and put themselves at risk to help our most vulnerable. So we are truly thankful for all the volunteers and staff and community partners that have banded together to help others in need. So finally, as we begin ramping down our emergency response and begin focusing on the long road to recovery, we're left with an unanswered question. And that question is, when it comes to food insecurity, what does our role as a city of San Jose look like moving forward in a post-COVID world? And we don't really, to be completely honest with you, we don't really have a straightforward answer to that, but we do have a couple of recommendations that we think could be really impactful. The first one is that we recommend to continue to support our food network backbone. Second Harvest Food Bank provides 90% of the meals to those that need. We recommend continuing to provide that reliable labor force to prepare the meal boxes. We also have a few partners like Loaves and Fishes and Martha's Kitchen that serve as the last safety net for those that are not eligible for other programs. We want to continue to hold the line there. As I pointed out earlier, not everyone's going to qualify for these more sustainable programs. And we can, from past data, we can anticipate that approximately 35% of them won't. So we need to have continued access to other options for them. In parallel, we need to start moving as many people as we can to some from the emergency food relief programs to more sustainable food programs like CalFresh, WIC, and SNAP. That's where a lot of the federal dollars have gone, is to support those programs. And we need to kind of start helping people as much as we can to get them there. And finally, we recommend advocating alongside our partners for sound food policies that will provide additional avenues for long-term food insecurity solutions. Specifically, one that we are extremely supportive of currently is universal school meals for all children. And so with that, that kind of concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Jill. That was a great presentation. It would be wonderful to get that to all the committee members so we can reference it. And I'm going to move into our public comment, and Mr. Soto.
First of all, First of all, Paul Soto from the Horseshoe, I would like to extend my sincere apologies to the committee for losing my composure. And I read, quote, John Steinbeck, 1938, Starvation Under the Orange Tree. It may be of interest to reiterate the reasons why these people are in the state and the reason they must go hungry. They are because we need them. Before the white American migrants were here, it was the custom in California to import great numbers of Mexicans, Filipinos, and Japanese to keep them segregated, to herd them around like animals, and if there were any complaints, to deport them and to imprison them.
Mr. Soto, I'm so sorry. It sounds like a very painful moment. Would you like to close your comments? Okay, Mr. Soto, thank you for your vulnerability and your comments. I know that we are listening. I'm going to move on to Mr. Beekman.
Hi. Paul will be back by the end of the meeting, I'm sure, and he'll have, it's a lot of work to do this, and he'll have something interesting to say. As always, thanks for this item. For my own self dealing with these issues, I've been going through my own kind of angst this week to try to describe, I'm trying to find a new place to describe our lives with COVID issues, and how are we going to talk about our next stage of our lives of a community with COVID issues. And this was an issue that really tried to describe that. And so thank you for the efforts of this item. I've learned incredibly important lessons about how if we practice good health practices where the food is initially grown in the Central Valley, and we can convince the large corporate farmers, to offer good health services to, the workers in those areas, they can deliver healthy, good food to the big cities, and then we can distribute that food, healthy, good food, to the community and persons who need it. And that is, this era of COVID-19 working well, and that is learning from this experience. And I don't think that it's those sort of lessons that are important in this time of COVID, that we should be open to learn the important lessons of this time and really grow from it. And I've always been saying, the most important lesson of all is how do we social plan ourselves in the future to not hurt each other and just learn our better practices and our better selves. So good luck with this issue, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Beekman. I'm going to now move on to my colleagues, and we have Councilmember Esparza.
Thank you. First off, I wanted to thank the whole team. The District 7 team and myself, we've been out and we're out regularly at all the food distributions in District 7. And I've witnessed firsthand the coalition and the volunteers, as well as the need in many, many locations in my district. It's not unusual to see 600, 700 or more in a few places, in a couple places in my district. It's not unusual to see that and see folks, hundreds of people sitting in their cars for 2 hours waiting for a couple of boxes of food. And it's a very, very sobering sight to witness. It's all ages, all backgrounds, as you mentioned earlier, Jill. And so thank you for all of your work. In particular, I wanted to thank you, Jill. I know that the city has extended contracts, and I wanted to thank you personally for your efforts to ensure that the food distribution through the CSIP Collective, providing fresh food throughout East San Jose, that work continues without a break. And I know you worked really hard to make that happen, and so I wanted to thank you for that. So thank you. I had a couple of questions. One of them, and I asked this at council on Tuesday for 3.1 because I know that it's complicated for us because we're squeezed in between the federal government and the community in terms of contracts. As we get the guidance in May from Treasury, will we be able to sort of analyze that to see if we can offer longer contracts? I know we've been doing them in short chunks. But are you looking at that to see how we might design the contracts differently moving forward?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Councilmember Esparza. We're looking right now, we're looking at how May and June are going to look. We're taking a look at the data. We're sitting down with the budget office. We're sitting down with EOC leadership. And that's what I call what we're doing immediate. So an immediate plan, we need to think about what our short-term plan is, which finishes out kind of the rest of the year. And then we need to think more longer term. And that's where I bring up that question of what is our role long-term? Now that we've seen and we know what food insecurity is, are we going to go back to only supporting senior nutrition program? Is that our role? Or is it somewhere and let the county continue to lead, or are we somewhere in the middle? And I think that's something that I personally don't have the answer for. I'm really interested in gauging what direction you all think we should go, and what addressing food and necessities long-term looks like for the city. And so I've been working on putting together some strategies, hopefully, as different types of recommendations and directions that we could potentially go long-term.
So that's answers a segue into my second question. So it was about ongoing support, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, I'll tell you, I'm starting off from the place that, yes, we need to be in the food business as our communities recover from COVID. Again, I've witnessed this many times in my district, seeing the need, seeing whole families. It's sobering. I'll tell you. I worked for a couple of nonprofits doing food distribution many years ago. I know what hunger looks like in normal times, right? And that we've had a huge chasm in Silicon Valley for a very long time. But I've seen things that I've never seen in my life during COVID, and the need is that great. And so to see people wait hours, with their cars turned off, trying to stretch that tank of gas, and to do that for 2 boxes of food, because on the other end, the food bank is trying to make what they have stretch. So people are getting less than they would get in a normal time because they're trying to feed. Nobody wants to say no, right? I definitely get where they're coming from. They want to make sure everybody's served in some way. And so, especially early on in the pandemic, it was very, very tough to see, a family walk away with, a few limes and a cabbage and some other, and that they're supposed to feed their family for a week. And so, and the eviction moratoria and in June. And, we will take that up, I'm sure, at the council, but the state will also make some decisions about whether or not that's extended. But we have a number of families, I think it's over 80,000 families in San Jose at the extremely low income level who owe money and can't pay rent. And so they're going to still owe rent, and hopefully they can get some rent relief, but they're still going to owe it. They're going to be either unemployed or underemployed after June, and it's going to take a while, right? And that's where this chasm between sort of folks that work in tech or who have been lucky enough to keep a job during the pandemic or able to work from home, and those that who lost their jobs completely, and that job may not return. And so to answer your question, I think, yes, I think we need to stay in the food business, and knowing that that's one of the reasons why the city of San Jose was given $223 million by the federal government, is to assist with recovery from COVID in a number of different ways. So I had a few questions sort of under that ongoing support, which is, how are we, you mentioned May and June, how are we looking at summer, right? Summer is usually when hunger is the worst because kids aren't in school. And so it's a gap that nonprofits and government usually fills. Are we looking at ramping up during the summer period? How are we looking at handling that?
Well, we are currently sitting down with budget and with our city leadership, and we're going over, what does that 90% look like, and going through the numbers and crunching them. We definitely don't want to have any disruptions in service. So it's a balance of going, hey, here's some more sustainable programs, because that, which is really key, is in many ways, is that we have CalFresh, we have some of these that are not meant to be emergency programs, like some of the ones we've been doing are moving people into some of those and kind of being a partner to make sure that transition happens for those that are eligible. We kind of, so that if we're moving people from one program to another, we see that as that's kind of what our focus needs to be over the summer.
Okay, so then I'm going to bring up the fact that summer is a gap, because that's when children aren't getting meals from schools. So that's, we should have an answer to that, because the need is going to be greater. I'll also say that I saw the slide, and I don't have the presentation, it's not in Granicus. So I understand, are we going to get that emailed to us today, or, okay. So I saw the slide that had SNAP and CalFresh and WIC on it. I will say that maybe early on in the pandemic, folks didn't get signed up for that, but it's pretty standard operating procedure at this point that those that are eligible for SNAP and CalFresh and WIC are getting it. And I know because, my office has done outreach, and we're hearing that from others too, that's happening quite a bit. It's actually one of the things, particularly with CalFresh, that's lessened our own costs, right? By having people enrolled and getting food through other programs. But we're not in a place to just say, okay, these 60 million plus meals, which, by the way, that just knocked me down right there. I mean, I knew the monthly totals, but you're right, add it all up, it's a very sobering number. On the one hand, it's amazing that our staff has been able to step up and help those, but on the other hand, that's an enormous need in the community. But we can't just transfer that, because most of those that are eligible are in it. It's just not enough. It's not very much. I mean, and I'll tell you, like on CalFresh, a household might get $145, which can go a really long way, trust me. But for a larger household, they're still going to need food assistance in some form, especially when they're unemployed or underemployed. I represent a district where most people have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make rent. And I know Councilmember Carrasco and Councilmember Arenas also have many areas in their districts that fall into that same scenario. And I had another question about ongoing support. So many of our food distribution sites are rightly in or adjacent to schools. We've done a huge successful partnership with school districts. Once schools reopen in fall, are we preparing for that at all in terms of food distribution sites?
That's a really good point. And I appreciate it. And I'm going to make note of that because it isn't something that I thought that much ahead to, but it is something that we need to have that conversation, especially because we want to continue to, support our backbone, Second Harvest. They do a lot of the distribution. You're absolutely right, at some school sites. And that's a conversation we can have with them to kind of see what they're thinking about in terms of in the fall, how that might transition more longer term. So thank you for that. I'll look into it.
And what I would add to what Jill mentioned is, as we're looking short term, definitely we're going to continue to prioritize addressing food insecurity in the short term, and then we're also kind of forecasting for midterm because we know that this issue isn't going to go away anytime soon. We do see a bit of a downtick, but it's not a downtick that kind of compares with the original 1.8 million meals that were being distributed prior to the pandemic, right? And at the same time, we also know that sustainability is a challenge, right? And so what we're also doing is working and reaching out with our various school districts and the County Office of Education around really making sure we maximize USDA. And I know they're trying to flex their criteria a lot more to better serve not only income qualifying families, but they're also looking at maybe even expanding that to include others. So we want to make sure that we leverage USDA funding to the extent possible, because to the extent that we could tap into that funding, then that frees up more funding that we could, address other food pockets, right, in other under-resourced areas. But definitely just want to reiterate that we are going to continue to prioritize food insecurity. The other thing is that we're also on a parallel track working with the County of Santa Clara, who has agreed to take really the lead and the point on really looking at food insecurity from a policy and systemic approach. And that's one of the good takeaways from this pandemic, is that definitely the need for greater coordination countywide as it relates to food really needs to go beyond the system that we had in place prior to the pandemic. And so they have agreed to do that. And so we're going to continue to inform that process as well. We won't be leading that effort, but we'll be a key stakeholder in doing that work to ensure long-term sustainability. So that's some of the thinking right now.
So is our intergovernmental relations team going to partner with the counties to lobby? So for example, USDA, you have to be a citizen, or you used to have to be a citizen, right? So I don't know what the policies have changed in terms of eligibility. But I'll tell you, there are a lot of people in my district that aren't eligible for USDA, right? And as soon as people start asking, are you a citizen? It's going to have the opposite effect of what we intend, particularly with so many families where you have mixed documentation, right? So it just creates a lot of complex issues if we start putting that at the front instead of trying to figure it out on the back end.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And one of the things that we're pushing is really the emphasis or the criteria should be on the need for food, not your status of residence, right? And so that's one of the things that we're hoping to advance as well. And yes, I think we could also, our intergovernment team is definitely on it. We're going to have to definitely reach out to other cities and the county as well to do the same, so that way we have a united voice. And so, yeah, that's a really good point. We'll have to really make sure that we advance that as well.
Okay, thank you. And then lastly, I wanted to bring up in terms of staffing, Jill, thank you for calling that out, because the city has, during the pandemic, our own city staff have heavily staffed these food distribution sites, either PRNS staff, DOT, like so many folks have been physically out at the distribution sites to help. And then we brought in the Conservation Corps under the city. Are we looking at the mayor's resilience corps in terms of hiring folks through that to assist with food distribution as we pivot? Have we identified food distribution as a need for that effort moving forward?
My understanding is that that is kind of the San Jose Conservation Corps could potentially evolve into having their work in the Resiliency Corps, if that makes sense. As that whole program is kind of developing, my understanding is that those things kind of combine. So yes, to answer your question, the food distribution piece could come out of that.
Okay. All right, that's it for me. Thank you. And thanks again, Jill. I really appreciate you stepping in to help the Si Se Puede Collective. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Esparza.
Wonderful. Councilmember Cohen.
Yeah, thank you, Jill, for the report. And I want to congratulate you and thank your team for really stepping up in the last year. It's an incredible pivot and a lot of work to pull that off successfully at that magnitude. So, and we've seen it across, with quick turnaround in a lot of parts of the city. Lines of cars outside the various community center for our senior lunches there. When school districts go on spring break, to have staff in the city plug in seamlessly to make sure that food distributions continue like they did last spring, even when school staff was off. Things like that were just happening, and so I just want to thank everyone at the city that was involved in making all that successful. There was a mix of distributions that were organized by the city, and then ones that were school districts. I assume the data you showed us were the city-specific ones and doesn't necessarily include numbers of what was distributed by school districts too. Is that correct?
Depends. Sometimes, so we do get data from the school districts, and that is included on our data dashboard. It's usually not complete because there's 31 different school districts, and so some school districts they send it every week. Some of them never send it at all, and so it's not a complete data set that represents everything. And even with the ones that are city led, we hope that they give us the data, but sometimes it's delayed and things like that.
Okay, yeah, because it's just important to be able to show the need and what was filled across the city, regardless of who the ultimate provider was in that case. Back to the question Councilmember Esparza asked about summer. I know that some school districts stepped up last summer to continue doing their programs outside of their school year. Have there been conversations about whether some districts may do that, or whether through some coordination they could help step up so that the city doesn't have to take on extra capacity, kind of like last year?
Yes, and thank you for re-asking the question, because I don't think that I clarified to Councilmember Esparza when she asked it as much either. We've been in contact with County Office of Education. They are currently, we have put out a questionnaire asking schools what their summer plans are, so that we can also kind of take a look and see what we can do to help for the summer if there's an opportunity. The school districts are also taking a look at the American Rescue Plan, because there's quite a bit of money that went directly to schools for that. And so that could potentially also be something that could be leveraged, but we don't have the answers just yet in terms of how that's all going to roll out.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I know that school districts had funding last year specifically to do that, and they may not have specific funding this year. At least, as you say, there may be some funding, but it's a little different than it was last year when there was direct money given to school districts to keep doing food distribution. But perhaps there's ways through, using funding that the city might otherwise put into some of its own programs to continue school districts operating, some kind of cooperation in that regard, so that district structures are better in place to provide meals and serve them, can be preserved without the city having to restaff or ramp up that in a way that would be temporary and hard to do. So just something to think about.
Totally agree. And thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Councilmember Cohen. Councilmember Esparza.
I was remiss. I wanted to acknowledge Paul Soto's comments earlier and thank him for speaking. and really sharing his heart and his experiences with us, and really highlighting the equity, right? The underlying equity. We've said this throughout COVID, that COVID has not just laid bare the chasms between the haves and the have-nots in our community, it's widened them. And so I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Esparza. I also believe the same. I think that we talk about systemic inequities and systemic racism, and Paul does very articulates in a way that allows us to see some of that the results of long-term systemic racism and inequities in his life, and he allows us to look into his life this way. So thank you for sharing that. And the only thing that I was going to ask Jill is if maybe on some of those, I love the slides, by the way, just love them. And if you could also get some statistics that are San Jose specific. I know that you had them for the whole county, which I really enjoy and I really appreciate. I'd love to see, especially around the kids, what does that look like for San Jose kids? And that could help us maybe also figure out where we need to focus for summer. I mean, I think we always need to focus for summer. We have summer lunches as well coming out of Welch and another place in our district. Anyways, I didn't see this, and Councilmember Carrasco, I think, is also going to be speaking. Councilmember Carrasco.
Thank you. I just wanted to acknowledge staff on all of the great work that's been done over this past year. Now I'm going to try and get myself off of video. On video. Let's see how long it lasts. But I just wanted to acknowledge staff and really extend my gratitude because when you have food insecurity, you can't think of anything else. I mean, this becomes your one and only focus, whether it's, at the end of the month, people are trying to figure out how to pay their bills and how to feed their children, or how to, prepare meals for their aging parents. It just becomes such a focal point. And what the staff was able to do in terms of pivoting their daily affairs to take care of some of the most pressing issues that we had as a result of COVID. By no means is it an easy feat, and I don't want that to ever go unnoticed. So I just wanted to really extend my gratitude, especially for districts like District 5, District 7, but we know we have pockets of poverty everywhere. Welsh Park is another one. In fact, in D8, there's several areas that we really need to pay attention to, because it's not just Evergreen, it is Evergreen and East Side. But there's downtown, there's Guadalupe neighborhood, and there's Horseshoe, even though it's getting very quickly gentrified. And so, my office and my team was out there at some point during the pandemic. By no means were we entirely focused on that, because we had other pressing issues. But being there during the times that we were, it was a very humbling experience. I have to just add, and a reminder of how this is most definitely a city of two tales, and we can't forget that. And having said that, my other council colleagues already asked some of the questions that I had, and I appreciate that. But I do want to acknowledge Paul Soto, and I'm hoping that Paul is still on the line and he's still listening and understands that he's got a council that truly respects his voice. Paul, if you're listening, we respect your voice, and it's a voice that we really need to hear ongoing, because we're reminded of how policies impact real people, and how history has had some devastating ramifications for some of our community members, for some of our residents in the city of San Jose. So as we continue to grow and we hail the Fortune 500 companies that are coming into the city or that are helping us in any other areas of our lives, we have to remember how the city was built and the families that were sacrificed in the process. And hopefully this is not a council that continues that that kind of pattern, and we'll have councils in the future also that really take that into account. But I just want Paul to really hear that you've got individuals on the council right now that really perk up every time that you speak. And I'm sorry of the the re-traumatization and that pain that has to be relived every time that you need to remind us. So for that, I really appreciate it. And I'm very aware of what our families have gone through. And, having lived also and been raised in the Horseshoe area. So I'm very familiar with our community there, past and present, actually. And so I just wanted also, Paul, to know that, our offices are here if you need anything whatsoever. And I'm going to just put my office number out there because I want Paul to always have it, as well as other residents that need our immediate and personal support. I want you all to know that we're listening. We're here to assist. We're here to support, and we're here to provide whatever resources and services that we are capable of, and also to know that if we're not, we will look for them. And so that's my reassurance and my commitment. And so my phone number is 408-535-905. That's my office number. Please give me a call so that I can that we can strategize and figure out how to best support you or anybody else that's listening. So I just wanted to be able to say that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Carrasco. We're going to move forward with, we have a couple of more items left on our agenda. So next we have Youth Programming Scholarships and Fee Activity Funding Report from our PRNS department.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members, members of the public. Andrea Flores-Shelton, Interim Deputy Director of Parks, Recreation, Neighborhood Services. Can you see my slides? Yes, thank you. I am here with House Vandenberg, Interim Division Manager, to present. And we also, and just so you know, these slides, they come directly from the memo. We just wanted to provide the slides. They're the tables within the memo, so members of the public could follow along because we don't have a separate presentation from what's in the memo. I'm also joined, we have, of course, John Cicerelli, Director, and Dave DeLong for Q&A. And so what we're bringing forward to you today in the memo, as well as our presentation, is the ongoing conversation related to our programming and fee activity. You'll recall that we kicked off this conversation December 2019 when we brought forward to you different, how our programs and how our service model was, how it really shows up in our community centers, in our enrollment, as well as in our scholarship. We continued the conversation in December when we brought forward to you our latest iteration, again, sort of based on our strategic plan, where we are looking specifically at examining our revenue generating programs and how we can increase scholarship, really as a means to improve our equity and access impacts in the community. And when we brought forward our report in December, we laid out how we do public, private, merit categories for our programs. And we shared with you different programs and how they laid out in those categories, and that we were going through a review process through the budget process and really examining whether there were opportunities to move from private, merit, public, and shifting again, all in an effort to increase access and improve equitable outcomes. At the December meeting, the committee asked for us to perform a cost analysis on the full cost of youth program operations at maximum capacity without a revenue offset. We're bringing back that information to you today. You also asked for an update on scholarship usage during COVID-19 and examine opportunities for continued and increased financial support that's necessary for families. And then during the February council meeting, we were also directed to perform a cost analysis of operating a full-day preschool model utilizing data from the current human resources classification study. So we're going to walk through this analysis. I really do want to just mention a few names. Laura Buzo, Amanda Carrera, and Camilla Muku, as well as Lori Urosky, were all really instrumental in pulling quite a bit of data together in short order and bringing this to council committee today. I also just want to recognize we do have an MBA that we just want to lay out that is related to this information today. So I know Councilmember Arenas, Councilmember Esparza, I want to recognize again, we have the MBA on Child Care and Recreation Services for low-income COVID-impacted families. So we'll be bringing that back. And again, much of this information will be the basis for that MBA. So I'm going to turn it over to Hal, who's going to walk through, again, the tables that are in the memo. And we're just going to call out the details of that quickly and then turn it back to the committee for further discussion. Hal?
Thanks, Andrea, and good afternoon, council members. On this slide, you'll see this table that's also in the memo, table 1. It shows the cost per program if we provided it at no cost for our participants. And along with the cost, the impact statement is how many participants, children and youth that we could serve at max capacity. So the analysis done was twofold. It was what would it cost to operate it free, and also knowing that if we did operate it at free, we could definitely expand those programs, and how many youth could we impact. So we did it for all of our youth programming. It's a comprehensive look from after school, summer camp, year-round recreation, sports leagues, including basketball, futsal leagues, and also our therapeutic program for children and adults who may have development or physical disabilities, broken up by program. And then the total here you see the 19,908,768. And again, like Andrea said, a lot of analysis went into this work. She thanked the staff that was a part of this, and I'd like to thank our frontline staff and specialists that are really key in programming in our community centers. That also helps our staff form these numbers and capacity numbers based on what they know in their community centers. Next slide. Right.
Wait, which one? Let's see.
Preschool. Yeah, you're there. Yeah, it went to the next one. I was a little confused.
Sorry.
Thanks, Andrea. So this is the analysis of if we offered a full day preschool model. So during the city council meeting on February 22nd, the department was asked to provide a cost analysis on operating a full day preschool model and to include the data in this report. Table 3 in the memo provides the cost of the full day preschool model. We did choose 4 specific locations, which were Almaden, Seven Trees, Roosevelt, and Mayfair. Those sites were chosen for the analysis just due to them currently meeting full day licensing requirements or needing very minimal modifications to meet those requirements. So those are kind of, from a facility standpoint, they're ready to go if we were to operate into a full day model. The program at these 4 sites would serve 91 preschool age children in a total of 7 classrooms, and we would run for 5 days a week and 8 hours a day. You can see that the total cost ongoing would be roughly $2.8 million, and there'd be an approximately $530,000 cost for one-time fees to set up playgrounds and other necessities at those locations. And then as far as the analysis on our scholarship model, we did provide analysis at the December NSC meeting, and we wanted to show the contrast of our scholarship that we've been giving out since COVID. So as you can see, this year alone, and we haven't even gone through the full year yet, as the time of this publication of this memo, we had awarded $2.5 million in scholarships through a combination of department budgeted scholarships and also through the Federal CARES Act funding. In our last, what I like to call a normal operating year back in 2019, pre-COVID, we issued a little bit over 900,000 in scholarship funds. So you can see a large increase in scholarships that we've been distributing during this year, and we're not even through with the year quite yet. Next slide. That concludes our short presentation. Like Andrea said, a lot of that information was included in the memo. We'd definitely like to open it up for a discussion and any questions that the memo might have sparked or the presentation.
Yeah, and Chair, I'd just like to add, we continue to understand, especially as, thinking about Jill's presentation and everything that's EOC related as it moves to recovery, is there's the immediate and then there's the next. And so we continue to try to understand what the summer needs are as it relates to schools, trying to have an ongoing conversation, utilizing whether it's the City Schools Collaborative or our direct conversations with superintendents on understanding the needs, for youth across the city and also in those areas of the city that have been most heavily impacted by COVID. But again, thanks to actions by the council, we do have the $1 million in CDBG that is really going to help to offset as help for camp and rock. And then you have the information in front of you in terms of sort of the scale of the cost of our programs and how we grapple with that for the future as it relates to the budget implications for moving something from private to merit to public. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move to our public comment. And at the moment I have Mr. Soto.
Thank you, Councilwoman Arenas. To Councilwoman Esparza, I ain't no afterthought. I'm going to make that directly clear to you. I ain't no afterthought. Conexión has been taken off the table, out your mouth, and I do volunteer in your district.
Mr. Soto, this is Councilmember Arenas, and you will please speak on the item and not directly to any council member, please. And if you can't do that, then we're going to have to skip your public comment. So we are going to move forward with Mr. Beekman.
Hi, thank you. Blair Beekman here. To just kind of offer my own feelings on, I was, from your words, it sounds like, I don't know if I heard quite correctly, but you're planning for this summer to start in classroom learning, and you were discussing the classroom plans for that. I didn't quite hear that correctly. But if I did, I figured it was time to just kind of go over what I've been learning about, say, I've been doing a lot of stuff in Fremont lately, and their school system, they canceled the remainder of this school year because of there's real concerns about the future of the coronavirus for this month and the new variations about it. And what was also my feeling was that they placed way too much burden on new technology practices, and they wanted to get some new technology things over the goal with opening up schools at this time. And I don't think, as I'm trying to speak here, I'm trying to measure our needs and what's urgent and what's direly important for ourselves and how we rebuild at this time, and technology, new technology practices, isn't making it. And it's okay to let that go, I think. I think we should feel okay to let that go if it's not working, because that's a whole new experimental system they want to open up, and it opens up a whole new bunch of surveillance questions and civil rights questions that We can take our time with that. The important thing is how we school our kids. And I'm trying to also learn that, is it okay to ask in our schools for this summer, is there going to be aerosol vaccines for the new HVAC systems? Is that a legal question to ask without feeling foolish? Thank you.
Sorry about that. Mr. Soto, I think you're already given an opportunity to speak. So we will go to the speaker with the numbers ending 5140.
Yeah, I'm unclear. Which roll call are we on right now, or review that we're on?
Yes, we are on youth programming scholarships and fee activity funding report.
Oh, okay. I'm on the wrong one. That's okay. That's fine. I'll call back. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, great. Thank you. So I'm going to move into my colleagues, and we have Councilmember Esparza.
Thank you. My question was actually what you brought up, Andrea, which is summer, what we're going to do as things start opening up, and to prepare kids to get back to school. I believe most schools should be in person by fall, knock on wood. So how are we looking at the design of what we can offer in the MBA that's coming back with that in mind? Can you offer any more on that?
John, did you want to take it?
I'll go ahead and start.
Okay.
John Cicerelli, Director of Parks, Recreation, Neighborhood Services. So next month, we're in front of you again as a committee to talk about summer programming. And I would just say that right now, there's still a lot of balls in the air. It's really tough to figure out exactly what that pathway is, but we've had a council action item where we've set aside $500,000 to support something through summer learning, whether that's tutoring or something. But we're still trying to get aligned with the schools. So we'll be meeting with the collaborative later this month. Councilmember Randis is on that group to talk about what are their needs, what are they planning to do, where are gaps we can help fill in terms of learning. We are already planning to do our basic recreational summer camp. So the question will be, what do we integrate in there that could be educational? We're not by trade really big educators of school age kids. Like, we do homework help in after school, but it's not the same. So we would likely have to engage someone else to help if there was real learning need to be taken care of. And of course, we're partnering with the library, who likely will be the lead in terms of helping figure out where the educational needs are for the summer. So we have probably more questions than answers right now, but hopefully by next month, we'll have more answers than questions as things are evolving fairly quickly at this point.
Okay, and that will align with the MBA process, because there are some big numbers here, but we have to remember that money was given to us as a community to serve the community, and it does, to Andrea's point earlier, it dovetails with our food needs and childcare needs. Like, they all really they're the same family, and really it's the same staff. Like, it's the same, mostly from PRNS, who are serving these same families from different ways. And so as long as it aligns, that's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and we have a lot more coming, right? It's just, the question is, what channels will it come through? Will it go directly to schools? Will the schools then want to turn around and pay us to do something for them, or will they do it themselves somehow? So all those questions have to be answered, but there is a lot of childcare money coming down the pipeline from the federal government. So there will be some opportunity. We're just not quite there with the answers yet, unfortunately.
Okay, all right, thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Councilmember Esparza. And I was actually going to ask about a little bit more about how our MBA, Councilmember Esparza, and my MBA that we submitted was integrated into this, but it sounds like that's still something that you're working on, correct, Andrea?
Yeah, that's a separate document. Yes.
Yes.
And
Yes,
that'll
it
be,
is.
that'll be prepared for the budget. So you'll be able to take action on it if you wish.
Right. No, I understand that. I understand it's two separate processes here. But because this work is so braided, as Councilmember Esparza just pointed out, that it would be interesting to kind of follow all of this and have it and be cohesive and have it make sense for us. And so, one of the things that I'd like to see is for us to move all key programs out of the private activity, that 100% cost recovery, by really revising the policy. And maybe this is not the time to actually do that in terms of the policy, but I think the committee needs to take a look at that. We need to take a look at what is this policy that is maybe hindering our families, and how do we revise that? What are we hearing from our families in terms of what their needs are? I know for childcare in particular, we have a lot of what is referred to as gap families, where they make a little too much to qualify for some childcare that is like a Head Start, right? And that's what we did last year. We covered a portion of that Head Start, those sites, all 14 different sites all across San Jose, so that parents could have a full, complete day for childcare. Now, I know we can't continue to sustain that, but because that's not the business that we're in, but why aren't we in this business? Because it does relate back to the recovery of our families. It relates back to also providing, for those kids, we wouldn't really provide after school care, or we could, it could be a ROC program, but I think that we just as a committee need to start exploring this policy a little bit more and trying to figure out how we craft it, how do we shape it, how can we provide that input to you as a department to help us continue to support our families, as I know that you have been doing. This post-COVID, it was, the scholarships were 75% coverage, and even with that, a lot of our families just couldn't make it. It was just too much. And John, I don't know if you remember, but I think it was I can't remember all of the classes that were at Welch, but do you remember we had to cancel like our first cycle of classes, because even with the 75% scholarship, and I think also in combination with, there's a lot of families who like to have like an on-site registration, and maneuvering through, a website probably isn't something that is secondhand to them. Hopefully now with COVID and them having maybe more access to the internet and maybe feeling a little more confident that they would be able to do that. But a lot of our families need that on-site registration and on-site access to scholarships. And so it was between, the policy that you all have for 75% to cover that class, and then our council money covered the other 25%, so that it could literally just be a free class. And that was the only way that we could get families there. And so I don't estimate that our families are going to be in any different kind of position. If anything, I think they're going to be in a worse position. And so, I'd love for us to continue to think about how do we create sustainability for these programs in the long run. And I'm going to go off topic a little bit, and Karen's going to have to prop me back on, but this is part of looking at some of our best programming or other programs that we actually fund, and seeing some of those case management type of programs, and how do we have Medi-Cal eligibility for reimbursement, right? How can we qualify for different types of reimbursement so we can create sustainability for our programs? Now, I know these rec programs are really different from a lot of the other Medi-Cal eligible programs like case management and home visits and things of that sort that many of our families get involved are involved in or need or want. And so I guess for me, the next question would be is how can we take a look at some of the other ways to draw down money other than, put a measure on the ballot, which I know that we're working towards, but is there any other avenues that we can explore for sustainability purposes so that we can really have a 100% beyond COVID money, beyond, this, the American Relief Act, when all of this is gone, we're going to still have families in this dire strait. So have we explored any of that long-term sustainability aside from putting a measure on the ballot?
Not specifically, but I will say that the conversation at both the state and the national level is to do things like universal pre-K, right? And make that accessible. That would create obviously funding streams, federal or state funding streams that would be sustainable then. There are these new type, what do they call them? Community something block grants. It's not CDBG anymore. It's CC.
Child care
Yeah.
development block grants.
Yeah. So that may create a source. But to the first part of your question about policy, we are interested in looking at that. The policy was written at a time, when we were in dire straits as a city financially. And so it was this financial model that was built to just be able to provide the services, but that means you have to pay for them. Really what we're seeing now and what we're thinking now is that really the space we should be in as a city, almost as an enterprise? We had a really interesting conversation this morning with a professor from University of North Carolina. They're doing an analysis for us right now that should be ready by the end of May that will tell us a lot about these gaps and maybe where the right spaces are for us to target as a city, that there is need. But we certainly, when we look at it, we think the need first is the families that can't afford it. And so maybe that's just where we need to be as a city. And this policy that we came up with, while it got us through a bad time and a rough patch, we're now realizing maybe that's not exactly the place we should be. And maybe we should be focused primarily on families that can't afford this care and being able to provide that care to them at no cost. And that would, of course, require revising the policy, but that's just a matter of doing some meetings and having some discussions, and we can revise it if we want to. The trick, again, there still is the money, ultimately, right? What is it going to cost? But so what I guess I say all that to say that I think we'll be in a better position in just another month or two once we have this research back to put that all together with the policy and say, here's where we think we belong and where we should be headed. And we can come back to NSC with that discussion with all of you.
And you mean the policy for 1-21?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. So when we need to have that kind of conversation right now, John, so that we can, so that the changes that we decide now can help inform the budget process.
I don't know that we need to do it right this minute. We can change that policy on any given Tuesday at council. The better part would be I think the thing that's in front of us right now is to start trying to line up funding, which in the short term, we're probably okay because all this federal money flying around for the next year or two. It's the longer term money that we've got to sort out. But we're already doing what I just said we should be doing, right? That's how we're operating our learning pods. We are targeting the most vulnerable kids, families that qualify for scholarships, and we're providing the service free. So in a way, the pandemic has pushed us where we already wanted to go.
Right.
Now, obviously, we could serve a lot more people, more kids, if it wasn't a pandemic, because we're limited in our class sizes. So by fall, when school lets back in, we may be in a better position to provide that to a broader group of kids, and we'll probably very likely be able to be back on campus. So we wouldn't be doing learning pods anymore. We'd be back doing after school programs, rock program.
Well, one can only hope, John, but I have a feeling that we're going to have these very, I don't know, tiered steps into full regular mode. Because at this point, we're both in the same school, our children are both in the same school district, and it's only 2 days a week. I mean, it's very, very specific and very different than what we normally would see and what parents normally would see. And I think, you and I, we work from home, and so we have that ability to adjust at a moment's notice when the district decides that we're going to return. But that's not the case for all parents. And so I think, for a lot of parents, they want to have some stability in being able to count on this particular program each and every time. And so that's why my question, what is it that you need from us? What do you need from the committee, if any kind of recommendation, so that this policy can change? And I understand that COVID has forced us to change to where we want it to be, right? This is where we really want to be. But once we are not in this emergency situation, then it does, it defaults us back, because then we're not forced to be to have this like 100% free. So I would love to ensure that the policy changes, and so I hope that you can bring back that policy recommendation, that change to that policy recommendation. So I know that might not be a need at the moment, because we're doing it, and there's some flexibility that allows us because of the emergency situation. But once that's done, then we still have to deal with that policy, right? And then I think, we're taking that shift right now where we're seeing this very differently. And I love that PRNS is all on this, this paradigm shift about, of course, these services need to be free. But I don't know that the rest of the council, aside from NSC committee members, are really on the same page. You've been taking us down this road because we've been hearing all the details, but I just don't know that the rest of our colleagues are on the same page. So anyway, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yes, we definitely want to bring it back. I just want to get my hands on the UNC work first, and feel confident about what space we want to be in, or what space we're going to occupy in relationship to all the other partners in schools and providers that are out there.
Right. Well, I appreciate that. That would be my main concern. That would be my main, I want us, when we talk about like systemic changes, once, I leave my position, we all leave you all advance into different positions. We want to make sure that we leave that mark in terms of changes, and not based on who the good hearts of the people who, might be the perfect group who cares about our community in a certain way and wants to see certain policies work, but we must leave those changes made before we move on, right? So anyways, I will stop there. I think I made my point. I want to make sure I see that, so we can talk about how that happens, and then continue to bring in this committee and our council members into the conversation that we've been having offline. All right, do I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Wonderful. Ruth, would you do the honors?
Cohen,
Aye.
Esparza,
Yes.
Carrasco,
We lost her, Ruth.
okay, Arenas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember, you're on mute.
Thank you, John. Okay, thank you, Ruth. We are on item D4. This is City Council Policy Priority number 18, Smoke-Free Housing Status Report. And I've got to give former council member Rocha props for leaving us his legacy of a smoke-free housing policy. All right, who is going to present?
Hello, Councilmember Arenas. This is Rachel Roberts, Deputy Director of Code Enforcement. And I am here today with my colleague Rita Tabaldo, who will be presenting the Council Policy Priority update for the smoke-free housing ordinance. And we also have our partners, our grant partners from the county Public Health Department, both Dawn Tran and Jennifer Aguilar, as well as the policy consultant that we've been coordinating with for this work. And her name is Leslie Waters. So she will be here also to answer any questions at the end of the presentation. And let's see, I was trying to share my screen. I don't know how successful I've been here. Okay, can you see my screen?
We can, Rachel. Could you maximize that so we can only see one slide at a time?
Sure, one moment.
It makes it much easier for our audience to see. And I'm not gonna lie, for those of us with glasses.
Yeah, one second. And Rita Tabato will be presenting in just a moment. I haven't had to do this a whole lot, so I'm not even sure where that option is.
Rachel, I wish I could help. I don't know if anybody wants to help. Rachel out.
When you share screen, you should see two separate things for PowerPoint. It will show you this screen, which is your presenting screen, and another choice should be the actual big screen. So click share screen again and see if you see the actual slide. I can't look at your screen, so I can't point to it, but that's what
and I apologize for that.
That's okay. I want
that's not it.
No, click at the bottom. No, at the bottom of the Zoom.
Oh,
so go to share screen on Zoom.
Got it.
And see if you see the other one.
Okay.
And this is Tony Tabor, by the way.
Thank you.
Hi, Tony. Thank you. We can also take this out of order if you like, Rachel.
There you go.
Oh, there we go.
There we
Okay,
go.
perfect. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon, Honorable Chair, Council members, city staff, and members of the public. I'm Rita Tabaldo, Division Manager for Code Enforcement. And we're bringing you the status report on City Council Policy Priority number 18, smoke-free housing. And so what we've done based on our last meeting that we met with in December, we continue to conduct outreach. We did some benchmarkings with the City of Berkeley, with City of Sunnyvale, as well as First Community Housing, and we wanted to obtain their feedback and also takeaways as to how it's worked for them as they have adopted a smoking-free housing laws. We also did some additional outreach to nonprofits. We reached out to the Law Foundation, PATH, Roots Clinic, Indian Health Center, and Abodi Services. And again, we wanted to ensure that we were listening to their concerns. We wanted to make sure that as we bring forth the proposed ordinance, that is a comprehensive and gradual approach. And so as we move forward with the next slide, the proposed smoke-free ordinance prohibits smoking inside multiple housing properties of 3 units or more, including private and shared balconies, patios, and porches. It includes cigarettes, cigars, cigarillos, hookahs, and pipes, electronic smoking devices such as e-cigarettes and vape pens and marijuana. This smoke-free ordinance would not apply to condominiums, exemption for hotels, motels that meet state and local law requirements. One of the key components is that we would want the property owners, property managers to incorporate language into the lease requirement to prohibit smoking inside the units and to be part of the rental agreement. Of course, there will be guidelines for enforcement. Next slide. And so here are the 4 key components of the implementation strategy. We want to do a phase approach. Again, we want to incorporate it into the lease requirements. We will continue to do education and provide resources, and to be a self and complaint driven enforcement. And as we move forward, so that there's 2 phases to the implementation plan. The first phase would be to focus on new construction. So as new properties receive their certificate of occupancy from building and they begin to lease up, we would want them to incorporate the language into their leases and to make these units compliant by January 1st, 2022. And again, being mindful that as we roll out the proposed and adopted ordinance, that property owners would have enough time to incorporate the information into the leases as they're being executed. Next slide. And then the next phase would be to focus on the existing multiple housing stock. And so the next phase, again, will continue to focus on education, provide information, and we would request for the property owners to notice all the existing tenants by January 1st, 2022. And then for everybody to have ample time to incorporate new leases or amendments and to be executed in full compliance by July 1st, 2022. Next slide. And so again, the emphasis is going to be on doing education and outreach because we want it to be a voluntary compliance implementation, doing outreach with property owners, managers, tenant outreach. We're going to develop our code enforcement webpage to continue to update and provide information, provide increased awareness of cessation services in the community. We're going to encourage volunteer mediation services. We will be providing materials, sample of lease amendments, no smoking signs, informational brochures in English and Spanish and Vietnamese. And we will post these as well on our webpage. And the enforcement strategy, so the focus here again is going to be complaint-based, self-enforcing. And one of the things that we took away from the city of Berkeley is what they implemented on their policy is that the complaining party must reside within the property. And for us, it would be within the complex. So that's something new that we would strategize. The initial engagement to take place from the property owner manager as part of the lease requirement. So if a resident is smoking inside the unit, basically they will be in violation of their lease. If the party continues to be non-compliant, after 3 complaints within a 12-month period, the complaint can be escalated to code enforcement. Code enforcement will then issue a warning notice. And then if we receive additional complaints within a 6-month period, then we would proceed to issue a citation. And so the takeaway here is that we did meet with the nonprofits. They had concerns about how hard to house individuals, how this ordinance would impact them. We wanted to develop a comprehensive, gradual approach, of course, providing resources, education for it to be compliant, but of course, we understand that not overnight, excuse me, everyone will stop smoking. So we do want to provide opportunities on a gradual approach, but also have a method for compliance. Next slide. And so the next steps, we will continue with the outreach, and we are going to finalize the implementation plan as well as the enforcement strategy, and then proceed based on your feedback to take to council for action in June. That basically concludes the presentation, and then we are open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rita. I'm going to go into, public comment and Mr. Soto.
Thank you, Councilwoman Arenas. From 1619 in Virginia, where the Pilgrims had landed with the slave ships, tobacco was the primary and first resource that was cultivated by slaves. This is the start point. This is the start point of the commodification and the introduction of this as a crop for consumption and to be profited from as a result of the slave labor, 1619. This is the start point. Okay, from that, what the reason why I'm commenting on this issue is that is an established fact. That this is not, all you got to do is read. That's all you have to do. Get a book and read it. And you will be informed about the entire history on which constitutes the foundation of this country. That's all you got to do. I literally dedicate at least 80 hours a week to studying, researching, and coming prepared to these meetings. And I resent the fact that Don Rocha is going to moralize and somehow or another codify his position on these types of issues. Where is he now? I've been at these council meetings for 2 years, consistently, every week, all week long. I ain't heard him once on public comment. I ain't heard this dude not one time, but yet I hear him referenced here. Where is he? If he was a city council member, then he should be a participant as a citizen, because a council member is a citizen. Where is he? Nowhere to be found. So I resent the fact that city resources are being used in order to moralize and codify that which has already been known as something that is established by the slave trade in 1619 in this country. Thank you.
All right, next we have Carol Baker. Go ahead, Carol.
Hello, thank you so much. And thank you for taking the first steps in this very important health and protecting the health of your community. I'd like to read you an excerpt from one of our group members of the Tobacco Free Coalition of Santa Clara County. We have more than 20 organizations that are members of our group. And one of them is called CAT. It is the Community Advocate of Teens Today. And they have written a letter that says exactly what I would say to you, so I'll just read from them. We appreciate you taking the time to make informed decisions on this very important topic. As many of us and our peers live in dwellings with shared walls, we're excited to see that the city of San Jose was taking measures to protect all residents from secondhand smoke. Unfortunately, when it was shared that the ordinance would leave out condos and 2-unit buildings and duplexes, we were really disheartened. We vehemently support a strong multi-unit housing ordinance that protects all residents of San Jose. We urge the council to choose the strongest ordinance and protect children, youth, and the elderly, and even our pets from the dangers of secondhand smoke. Thank you.
Thank you. And because it's 3:43 and we are going to lose quorum because Councilmember Cohen needs to go to a TPAC committee, I'm going to make a decision on having our comments limited to 1 minute. So Sheila Fan is next, and you'll have 1 minute.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Sheila Fan, and I am a tobacco health education intern at Breathe, California. First off, I wanted to thank all the individuals responsible for protecting San Jose residents from secondhand smoke exposure in multi-unit housing. However, this current ordinance does not protect all residents. Such loopholes will only push the problem into the future, further putting San Jose residents' health and quality of life at stake. And there's no justice for residents who live in condos and 2-unit duplexes. From my personal experience, my uncle and my family used to live in shared 2-unit duplexes in the south side of San Jose for over 20 years. Given their exposure to secondhand smoke, they faced a multitude of devastating health events. 2 of my cousins currently have severe asthma. Unfortunately, one cousin at the young age of 8 months old died of sudden infant death syndrome. And my uncle passed away from lung cancer in 2018. Given these stories, I hope that stronger ordinance can be done with this.
Thank you. Next is somebody with a phone number ending 5140.
seems like a lot of new rules and laws. I'm not sure, how they're going to work. I know that if you have a flagpole too high, man, they make you move it real quick. That doesn't affect anybody's health, and the fines are for surely high. There's no grace periods like you guys are talking about. But if tobacco's so bad, maybe you should make it illegal. San Jose PD promotes where you can buy marijuana and have it delivered. Can you imagine that? So if everything's so bad, maybe you shouldn't take the tax from the tobacco or the marijuana. And how are you going to really enforce this time and time again? It seems very Byzantine. I don't know. I think that the city should focus on some other things versus this. This is also a state where people don't smoke that much, but there's plenty of vaping and marijuana going on. I want to see how that's going to be enforced. I think that you guys are making more work that's unnecessary.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next is Sean Kiley Rye.
Good afternoon, Chair Arenas and council members. Sean Kelly Rye, Silicon Valley Cannabis Alliance. I have reached out to Rosalind Huey and also to Rachel Roberts, and they've been kind enough to set up some time with me. We don't feel that the cannabis industry has been fairly reached out to. Cannabis cannot be smoked anywhere but in your home. And the problem there is if someone lives in a multifamily home and is a medical marijuana patient, then they have nowhere that they can actually consume. Unlike tobacco, you cannot go on a street and you cannot use it in your car or use it somewhere else. And so you're actually forcing folks that need cannabis to not be able to consume in multi-unit dwellings. And so we just like to have more conversation around that issue, please, to see how that's addressed. And then also, as a larger issue, San Francisco found that unscrupulous landlords use this as a loophole to get rid of affordable housing, rent control.
What? Thank you. Next is Tao Wu.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. I'm also an intern at Breathe, California, and actually manage a secondhand smoke helpline. A lot of the callers are actually residents of San Jose, as smoke from cigarettes or other tobacco products can enter through windows, beneath doorways, through vents, and through walls. A lot of our callers are living in apartments as well as condos. They're both suffering from the burden of secondhand smoke as well as the added stresses of their health. One caller of mine is a senior citizen. She, although suffering from mobility challenges, she has kind of lost count the many times that she has to walk downstairs to her neighbor and ask them politely to stop smoking indoor. And the number of times she's called property managers without any resolutions. I can attest that this is one of many callers with similar distresses. I think there needs to be support from the community and policymakers to step in and protect them. So I hope that you take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Vanessa Marvin.
Hi, good afternoon, council members. My name is Vanessa Marvin. I'm the co-chair of the Tobacco Free Coalition of Santa Clara County. And you have our official organizational letter in your record, so I'm not going to go over that, but I did want to speak more personally. I am a resident of San Jose and a resident of multi-unit housing. I live in a condo building right near Diridon Station in District 6. And I'm a parent of 2 young kids who live with me in this multi-unit housing. And so like any parent, I'm always thinking about their health. So while the coalition and myself are really excited that you're considering this protection, the way that the staff is proposing it would ultimately not protect my family and many other residents of San Jose. So it's not including residents of condos and it's not including residents of duplexes. So we urge you to think about this a little bit further and can include all residents. In addition, all of the other cities in the area who have passed policies have included cannabis. So we want to ensure that's in there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And Margot Sidner.
Sorry, I was in mute. So good afternoon, Chair Arenas and council members. I'm the CEO of Breathe California of the Bay Area, Golden Gate, and Central Coast, serving San since 1911. I first thank you for advancing this ordinance to protect residents from secondhand smoke. We're excited to see this progress, and it's been a long time coming. But as I conveyed in the letter that we sent, we're extremely disappointed to find that thousands of residents of San Jose would not be protected under the proposed ordinance for the same reasons that my colleagues have just said. And I want to leave you in the interest of time with just two things I want you to really consider. First, secondhand smoke is just as dangerous in a condo as in an apartment. Secondly, secondhand smoke is just deadly in a duplex as in a large complex. Please, I urge you to act for these amendments, include condos and duplex.
Thank you. And now I'm going to turn to my colleagues and Councilmember Esparza.
Move approval.
Second. Ruth, would you do the honors?
Cohen,
Aye.
Esparza,
Yes.
Arenas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Now we're going to move into item D5, and because we're going to lose Councilmember Cohen in just a minute, in just a little bit, I'm hoping that we can be very concise in this presentation. Is there one included?
No, so we'll be really concise.
That's great. There couldn't be more concise than that. All right.
Yeah, let me just basically summarize. What you have in front of you is the schedule based on the last NSA meeting to come back on those 3 items. So we've laid out who the groups are we have to meet with and get the buy-in from. That takes us basically to the end of August. So we would likely be in NSC in September, October with all those recommendations and responses. So that's it in a quick nutshell.
Perfect. That's the 3-part for the timeline. Thank you so much. And I'm going to go to public comment. And once again, I'm going to limit public comment to 1 minute. Is it Paul Soto first, Ruth? Okay, Paul, if you're able to hear me. Okay, we're going to move into a caller with the last numbers 5140. We'll try Paul once again in just a minute.
I'm unclear. Is this open forum or is this identifying the grants for the community crisis response?
This is a report on the timelines for identifying improvements to bringing everyone's strengths together, grant program oversight and accountability, and community crisis response protocol. Yes.
All right. Okay. I'll be quick. Yeah, it's with Parks and Recreation, and these parks they need a grant to be able to fix the bathrooms. I mean, the bathrooms at the parks are disgusting, and they need to maybe have somebody there, paid staff employee, because restaurants and businesses can't operate with bathrooms that are at the Rose Garden. It's disgusting. I think Deb Davis's office.
Sir,
Parks and Recreation money.
Yes,
right?
I hate to interrupt you.
Money.
Excuse me, sir. We're talking specifically about youth programs under youth intervention services. Do you have a comment regarding that?
Okay, well, if there's going to be youth services, I hope they have bathrooms that don't look like the Rose Garden, right? You know, I hope that all those things are operating correctly in a sanitary way, especially given COVID, when we're told time and time again to have to wear a mask. I hope the money is going to be going into the infrastructure of these areas where these kids are going to.
Thank you, sir. Okay, next we have Susie Rivera.
Oh, okay, and I think everyone can hear me. Good afternoon, committee staff and committee members. I'm Susie Rivera, I'm the VP of Youth Voice Initiatives and Executive Director of Fresh Lifelines for Youth. I'm here to speak on behalf of FLY, member of Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits and a part of the community of best nonprofit service providers serving San Jose's youth and families. We support the general direction of the memo. We appreciate the idea of slowing down things down a bit for proper collaborations, partnerships, and appropriate reflections of the work that's being done. And it's just, I want to reiterate the importance to bring the CBO community to the table to work together on reformulating strategic direction, as well as engaging in conversation in regards to robust and reasonable performance objectives for contractors. That includes capturing the work that may not be reflective in the current collection process. As we know, the pandemic has created more needs and has shed light on new needs. And as we see the light at the end of the tunnel, there'll be more challenges. In order to be responsive to what our youth and families need, it'll be crucial more than ever to do this together. Thank you so much for all the staff and committee members that have the best interests of our youth at heart. Thank you. Sorry I went too fast. I wanted to make it in a minute.
You did it, Susie. Thank you. Okay, Selena Chun, please.
Hi there. I'm Selena Chun from Alamark Counseling Center. And echoing Susie, my comments are provided on behalf of Alamark Counseling Center and our community of best agencies serving San Jose's youth and their families. We also support the general direction of this memo. We request that the council staff bring our entire CBO community to the table to collaborate and work together on reformulating strategic direction, as well as reasonable performance objectives for contractors to follow. We thank the council staff for your work on this item and to the committee members for having the best interests of our youth and families at heart. We appreciate slowing things down so that we can all figure out the best way to measure all of the great work that's being done, and continuing to always work together to improve and support our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Mr. Soto.
Paul Soto, as a citizen that had entered juvenile hall in 1979, as a result of the neglect of this conversation happening right now, I advocate on behalf of those youth right now that are going to be impacted right now. There are mortgage companies and California Department of Corrections that are monetizing and borrowing against the social and economic and political conditions of the barrios. Right now, I guarantee it, this is a fact. And they are monetizing the symptoms of this neglect that's happening right now with respect to their education. They are monetizing that because they know precisely how many prison beds they are going to manufacture in the future. This was laid out by Councilman Peralez's documentary of the kids that we lost. I'm one of them. I'm speaking to my city right now, informing them. There is nobody that is given public comment that has my life experience. Absolutely no one. So no one can challenge me.
Thank you, Mr. Soto, for sharing once again. Tony Welch.
Hello, my name is Tony Welch Torres. I'm a program manager for Uplift Family Services. I represent them as well as the other BEST providers. Having been funded by BEST for over 10 years, truly appreciate the support that we've had to work with families in our community. I just want to reiterate the importance of taking a really good look at the evaluation process that's currently in place with BEST. I believe that it's too focused on units of service as opposed to working directly with families on many of the things that we can't measure in the current workbook analysis. We had many parents and youth we work with this year, one youth in Eastside San Jose who lost his mother to COVID. And what that looked like in terms of service was support at the hospital, grief services, food. His family was immigrants and they suffered from fear of help, and really only was one service in the current system, but we need that kind of support. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman. I just wanted to quickly remind of how open public policies with technology ideas can really be of help to these best service programs. It can help with sideshow issues. It can help with police themselves and issues. The ACLU and CARE, Committee of for American Islamic Relations, they can hold Saturday schools for all of these groups and as an idea for the future and just ways to integrate good practices of civil rights and civil protections for an entire community. It's interesting work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beekman. So now I'm going to go back to my colleagues, Councilmember Sparza.
Thank you. And I know we're going to lose quorum, so I will be quick. First off, I wanted to address some of the comments made today and before. I believe that there's a tremendous amount of miscommunication on this, and so I would love to, I've talked with some of the nonprofits that serve District 7, but I'd love to kind of get at what is behind that and how these misleading things keep moving forward. Secondly, I wanted to thank Paul Soto for his comments earlier, because really the North Star for this is what's happening in the communities. I and my team have been out in District 7 and every neighborhood throughout the entire process, and have seen how violence has increased in our neighborhoods. Gang violence in particular has gone up. And so we need this work now more than ever. And as we talk about reimagining policing, you know, BEST in the Mayor's Gang Task Force was the original reimagining, right? 20 plus years ago. This was the original reimagining. And so my goal is really that we have a functioning system, because I do believe we need to look at the resources that we're providing to our neighborhoods and how we can uplift our neighborhoods and the kids and the families who are relying on us. And so I also, before I make my motion, I did actually want to make a motion to realign this work with the budget process and the audit process with that in mind. I know that internally we have some staffing needs around the management and oversight of the contracts. I have met with some of the best contractors who do a lot of work in District 7. And during COVID, I think one of them raised the issues about the 20% match being a challenge for them because they are hard hit with COVID. I understand why that was an issue, why that was put into the contracts, and I believe that that was the right decision. But I would also ask that staff look at seeing how we can lift that or fill that gap during COVID as we all get out of COVID. So it would be a temporary measure. Yeah, and I'll be really quick. So my motion would be that we refer this to the budget process, that we ask staff to have an MBA that provides oversight, accountability, and coordination, and that we look at the resources internally and externally in order to do that effectively. And also thank you, and also that this come back with a brief update in NSE, and I'll leave that up to staff either in August or June, because I know that there's a lot of other work with some work plans around BEST that I want an update. And I'd also like to have a conversation about schools. We've been meeting on this for several months, and it wasn't until the March memo that I learned that coordination with schools was an issue. But anyway, so the motion is to refer this to an MBA and add an NSC meeting in either June or August.
Second.
Thanks. All right. Okay. Thank you. Okay, no other comments. Wonderful. Do you want a bit of a response, Councilmember Esparza, in terms of this?
Yeah, John or Angel want to add to that. That's fine. Otherwise, I'm ready to vote.
Yeah, we're happy to do the MBA. It probably makes more sense to come back in August just because we'll have more, I think, more to talk about than we would in June. We'll be further along. Just keep in mind that we have a task force meeting at the end of August where we would sort of get that final buy-in. So we won't have had that meeting if we come back in August, just for information. But,
sure, yeah, and I would like to talk more about schools. August works for me. And we can talk offline about more coordination with schools, how we can I mean, I'll be really honest, I'm worried about this summer. I know it's been hot. It's going to get hotter. There is a lot of violence out in the community. I want to be as ready as we can this summer. But I know that a lot of this work is really ongoing. And as we start the new school year, I'd like to be as ready as possible. And I'm happy to work with you offline on that.
Okay, thank you. And then one other item on the 20% match. We can look at that administratively. That may be something we don't need a council action on or committee action on. I think maybe that's something we might be able to just change up, just like we have with other things during COVID, and sort of suspend it for some period of time.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Perfect. 406. Okay, Ruth.
Owen,
Aye.
Esparza,
Yes.
Arenas.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are in open forum. And we have Mr. Beekman.
Hi, Blair Beekman here. Thanks for a good meeting today. It was nice to be around. It's the Council on American Islamic Relations. I think that's how you say it, CARE. And they're a really interesting group. They've really defined our civil rights and civil protections since the era of 9/11. They've really helped establish some important ground rules in what we're building for our future at this time. And to offer a Saturday school for different parts of San Jose, from best programs to the police department themselves, they all need some help with civil rights and civil protection issues. Hopefully it can be of interest how to possibly involve the ACLU and CARE into some sort of Saturday teach-ins or something. It'd be a fun community experience, I think, for a Saturday, almost as fun as dumpster days. I've got 9 seconds left. I don't have much time. So thank you for the meeting today.
Thank you, Mr. Beekman. Mr. Soto.
Thank you, Councilwoman Arenas. While I respect your authority to censor me with respect to my comments earlier, I do not agree with it, and I'd like that to be a part of the record. Secondly, the city is symptomatic of what happened July 14th, 1846. Until this city gets acquainted with the fact that every single law, every single system, every single concentration of wealth at the expense of the Mexican was had at the decapitations of the Native American populations by policy via James Polk, administered through Peter Burnett in the state of California. Period. It's very simple. Out of Masonic Lodge 10. Masonic Lodge 10 in San Jose, California is the policy that instituted this into San Jose. Reed, James Reed.
Thank you, Mr. Soto. The caller ending with 5140.
Hi, thanks for letting me on today. Sam and Pam Foley, they don't like to let me on too much, like to hang up on me or pretend I'm not there. That's okay. They're snooty. That's all right. But thank you today. But my main thing, I can't say it enough. You got to clean up these parks. You got to clean the bathrooms. It looks terrible. It's not sanitary. It's disgusting. And if you want more money for these parks, get rid of the thug park police who likes to wave their aluminum framed ticket books in people's faces for sitting at picnic benches. You need to get rid of the park police. They're thugs. They're exactly what Paul Soto said. They're looking to bust people for nothing. They verbally abuse minorities. They threaten them. They arrest people. They don't even have a car to drive around in half the time. San Jose PD dumps them off. It looks like they're glorified Boy Scouts with their green pants and their tan shirts. They need to be stopped. You need to invest in these parks because that's all we got left with this whole COVID thing.
Thank you. And that is the end of our meeting. Thank you all for participating. Have a great rest of the day.